Hello, Brittany Jackson here today to focus on the very non-scary universal design for learning, specifically the representation aspect of UDL. This presentation is from one of 3 UDL workshops offered to Hiram College faculty in the spring of 2018, where I presented on each of the 3 tenets of UDL: action and expression, representation, and engagement. And this particular presentation focuses specifically on representation. So what is UDL? According to the Center for Applied Special Technology, or CAS, UDL is a research-based set of principles to guide the design of learning environments that are accessible and effective for all. So UDL began in the 1990s and is based on the original model of universal design that focused specifically on physical accessibility, more specifically for those with mobility challenges. So UDL focuses more on the educational environment and how to make every learning opportunity in your classroom accessible to your students, regardless of the differences they may have from each other. So there are 3 tenets of UDL, as I mentioned. So you've got action and expression, representation, which we'll focus on in this presentation, and engagement. So the image here depicts a bunch of clothespins that are in a variety of colors and styles hanging on a line, and I think it's quite apropos of representing for representation, I'll say that 5 times fast, the variety and diversity of students you may encounter in your classroom. So the first tenet under representation is all about perception. So you want to be sure you offer your students a variety of ways to view the course materials. So if it's electronic materials, provide ways to change the size of the images, the graphs, or the text, or visual content. So for some people it might be too small, needs to be able to get bigger, so provide them that option. Make sure there's a contrast between the background and text or images. So don't go a light color on a light color because that can be very difficult to see for some folks. Are you using only a change of colors for emphasis? Some people are colorblind, so using colors may not help you in that case, but if you bold it or underline it or italicize it, that might help bring the emphasis forward. What's the rate of the speech in the video that you're watching? Is it too fast? Because I know I sometimes speak too quickly, and if it's going really quickly, some people may not be able to keep up with a high rate of speech. So think about the speed or the timing of the video. If you need to slow it down, do so. Think about the layout and other visual elements. What is it clearly delineated on the page? Are things overlapping? Is it hard to understand? Be careful there. What font are you using for printed materials? Most of the time I would recommend going Calibri because you're probably going to be able to access it. Most computers will have it, and it's probably one of the straightest, most clear font representations. And then can you provide multiple means of access to the same content within your class? So can you show a video that represents what you're trying to show, as well as provide a handout, as well as put something in a presentation, as well as lecture on it. So there are multiple ways that students can access this. Maybe if it's a chemistry concept, maybe they've got a way to use a model. So there's a physical representation as well. So when we think about perception, we need to think about the various alternatives for perception too. So in this case, we're looking specifically at those who may have auditory impairments. So the image here shows a man attempting to listen with his hand cupped to his ears and sound waves moving into his ear. If you've ever been at a restaurant or concert and attempted to talk with your friend next to you, and you had difficulty understanding what was being said because it was too loud in there, you might sort of be able to understand the difficulty of not being able to hear. It can be frustrating. So imagine, though, that you can't hear what your professor is saying in a quiet classroom, or your professor showing a film in class but doesn't put on the subtitles so you can follow along. It may be even more difficult to understand the importance of that video and how it relates to your class then. You want to ensure that everybody can access all materials, be it videos, images, music, or other types of information that involve sound. This can be done by providing charts and diagrams or visual notations. Make sure you're showing the captions in the video using visual cues to represent emphasis, such as bold or underline. Use visual cues for sound effects. So in this image, we've got the various frequencies happening going towards his ear, so that's a representation of sound effects in a sense. Or you can provide, description for a musical interlude. You can say, in this song, it is Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, and you can describe it. So what are the ways that you would describe Beethoven's Fifth Symphony? Think about that when you're incorporating these into your classrooms. Then you've also got those who may have visual impairments. So you want to be sure to provide descriptions for all images, graphics, or videos so that a text-to-speech software can read them. So for those of you in the sciences, that 3D modeling aspect might be really useful for someone who has vision issues. So they can kind of feel the model and get an accurate image or idea of what's being discussed. Always be careful to include auditory cues if you're talking in your lecture. You'll notice that I've already mentioned what was going on in each of the images I've had on the screen in this presentation, so that anyone who has difficulty seeing can have an understanding of what was in the image and why it was important to be there. So another tenet of representation is the use of language and symbols. The image here shows a piece of dark rock with hieroglyphics and symbols drawn on it. And I don't know about you, but I have no idea what most of these images mean. Though maybe down in the bottom left corner, I maybe see a deer trying to eat some leaves, maybe. But as an instructor, you always want to identify and clarify your vocabulary and symbols. So provide an alternative text description to assist text-to-speech software, but also just explaining and showing your students that the equal sign, for example, the two hash marks on top of each other, is equivalent to the words equals or equal to. Or maybe you're using the symbol theta. Be sure you explain what theta means and what that symbol's called, and that symbol there represents theta. This can be especially important for your international students or those who have English as a second language, because now we're changing languages by using theta or any other Latin or Greek term. And depending on the culture, they may use the symbols to represent something different in their language. So by simply identifying the symbol and what it means textually and aloud in the classroom, this might allow students to learn the materials more easily. So continuing with languages and symbols, think about ways to make connections to previous concepts or real-world examples. That'll make it more concrete for the students, because abstract ideas can be harder to grasp. But if you tie it to something concrete, students might grasp it more easily. So as I mentioned before, be sure that whatever symbols you use, a text-to-speech software might be able to read. Putting the information in the alt text, so if it's an image, for example, will help, because then text-to-speech software can pick that up. Or you can record your voice and add captions for students to see it more easily. Multiple representations are also key. The more ways a student can access information about the material, the better. If you do have English as second language learners in your classroom, and even if you don't, people may find it difficult to understand certain concepts, so they might find it easier to do so in their primary language. And so allowing them to use either an electronic translation tool or reading the textbook in their original language might be beneficial to them. And again, when you're looking at visual clues, when you embed those visual clues, make sure that you've got identification to help the students understand the vocabulary. So the more ways of showing the concepts, either visual, verbal, illustration, diagrams, etc., the more likely your students will find something that makes sense for them so that they can then understand the concept that you're trying to teach. As my image here of chain links represents, always explain the links between the text and the representation to make it as clear as possible for your students. The more ways they can link it, the better they're going to understand the concept, and the more likely it's going to stick and stay with them. The next tenet is comprehension. So here you want to build upon prior knowledge. What do they already know from your course or from other courses they've taken? Build upon real-world examples if you don't know what courses they've taken. Use multiple methods to show the concept. How does it connect to their life? Why is it useful? Be sure to emphasize or highlight the key information. What are the most important takeaways that the student walks away from the lesson with? Provide outlines. Sometimes just having that extra piece, either of paper or an extra, Word document that you've stuck in Moodle, can be really helpful to let students know what you really want to be focusing on or what you're reviewing or talking about. And then if you use technology, always draw the student's attention to the critical information. We get very used to putting a lot of information into our PowerPoints or our lectures because we want to engage the students or draw their attention into whatever we're talking about. And that's great because we do need to engage them. But if you've got everything there for them, it can be a bit overwhelming. So make sure you highlight what's important for the students to understand and use that guide so the students can then take part in their own learning. They can find the things that are going to help them learn the pieces that you think are most important. And so I love this image of someone placing blocks to look like steps going up because scaffolding or building upon knowledge is a lot of what learning is. Step by step, we get a little further up the steps. We learn things one piece at a time, so it makes sense to draw on that previous knowledge to then build upon the new information you're giving them. That makes the idea of tackling something new less scary too. So if in your presentation to your class something's unnecessary, get rid of it. It would just be a distraction that your students might become fixated on. How often have we, accidentally left the wrong word in there that, maybe there was the word quiz and students became fixated thinking they had a quiz, when in actuality, that was just a mistake on our part and it accidentally stayed in there. And so then they're focusing on the fact that there's a quiz and not actually what you're attempting to explain to them. So just be careful and get rid of anything that's unnecessary in your presentations or in your assignments. And then, of course, provide step-by-step instructions. What are the most important things that they need to know how to do when they leave your course? And they say that practice makes perfect. And the most students can use and utilize the concepts that you're teaching it. The more that students can use and utilize the concepts that you're teaching them, the better they will understand it. So build upon what they know. Use real-world examples. Real-world examples are huge. If you can identify how they're going to use this in their career or how they're going to use this in life, the more likely they are to then take that and utilize it even further. They'll take it to the next degree automatically without even having to try if they know that it's going to help them down the road. So here's an image of many useful apps for Universal Design for Learning that focuses specifically on the means of representation. So this image, this document, will be in the Moodle site with clickable links to the apps, which everything will be available within the UDL module on the Feather Fellows Moodle site. So pay attention, watch for that. It should be up there soon. And if you have questions about UDL, you can always reach out to me at jacksonb1@hiram.edu or extension 5380. Or you can also contact Litza Veronis, one of our instructional designers. She also can assist you, and her email is veronisem@hiram.edu or extension 6114. I hope this presentation's helped you, and please check out the other presentations about UDL to assist you in anything that you're considering. And remember, if you're confused or having trouble accessing it, your students will too.